triangle pose and half moon pose, Trikonasana and Ardha Chandrasana. These are two seemingly similar yoga poses on the surface, but they actually have some key biomechanical differences that can be really informative to know about. So today we're going to take a look at the anatomy and the biomechanics of both triangle pose and half moon pose. I'm Jenny, and this is Travis, and we are the co founders of Strength for Yoga, where we teach yogis how to strength train in an asana specific way. So let's get started, Travis.
Let's do it. Would you like to demonstrate these poses for us?
Yes,
All
I
right.
would.
So we'll start with triangle pose or Trikonasana. And you can see what this looks like. We'll get into it more in a moment. You could also use a block.
Yeah, I kind of
Very commonly.
personally like a block here, but yeah.
And so that's triangle pose. And all she has to do to get into half moon from
That's
there
right.
is
All I have to do.
tip over like a teapot.
Right.
So
they seem so the same, right?
Yeah, this is half moon, Ardha Chandrasana. Very similar on the surface, but we will dive into the differences in why you might want to practice one versus the other, or just understand what's going on at each of the joints and what the effort is and what the positional, all those things.
Totally. So that we can see maybe how they are similar, but definitely how they are different.
Mm-hmm.
So should we start with triangle pose?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I guess I'll keep the block around.
Let's do it.
So will you tell me what's going on? I do triangle. I'm taught this in many yoga classes. We do this pose, but what is happening here movement wise?
Yeah, let's talk about the left foot first.
My front foot?
Front foot, right. The front foot is in a position of external rotation. The back foot is in a position of neutral rotation.
Yeah.
Because the toes are just straight ahead. So that's our hip rotation. And then when Jenny tilts or tips her torso to the side, she goes into a position of hip flexion
at this
on the front hip, as well as hip abduction.
Can we show what's adduction and abduction? What is that?
Yeah.
So if we're standing, adduction, which is the opposite of that front leg, is crossing the midline, and abduction is taking the leg away, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So when the legs are out wide at first, we're in an abducted position on both sides because the legs are wider than the midline. But what happens when Jenny tips the torso over to the one side, the front leg goes into a higher degree of abduction. But what actually happens, and this is not immediately obvious necessarily, or at least it wasn't to me the first time I looked at it, is that the trail leg, the back leg, actually goes from an abducted position to an adducted or adducted position.
That's right.
And that's because
it's a little tricky to see.
Yeah. When she starts to tip over, she goes through neutral, because neutral is like a straight line from shoulder to ankle.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So she's a little bit inclined, but once she goes fully inclined, she actually goes through neutral and into an adducted position.
Because if you can kind of see it, preserve this angle relative to my pelvis. If I kind of brought that in, it's like this. It's in a little bit on that back leg. It's a little tricky to see, but yeah. Yes.
So what all of this means
what does it mean, Travis?
Is that what you're going to feel in this position is a stretch through the inner thigh of the front leg, the adductors, because you're in an abducted position. And you also might feel a stretch through the abductors, or lateral hip on the outside hip, because you're in an adducted position.
That's right.
And that isn't necessarily, I don't think we always key in so much to what is going on in the outside hip. We certainly feel the inside adductor getting that stretch.
And hamstrings too, right? On that front leg?
Yes, back of the thigh, hamstrings, as well as on the front leg. But maybe one thing that you can notice more is the outer hip, as well as perhaps some length through the torso or side body on the top side. So what is further interesting about that oblique or side body on the outside leg is that when you have the hand down on the block, that top side doesn't do a ton
Like
of
this stuff
work.
here.
But if you were to hover the hand in triangle, then you actually get some really nice work through the side body on the top
Yeah,
side.
like the obliques up here have to
Yeah.
work to hold
Like
you.
kind of like a side plank feeling.
Yeah, right. But when the hand is down, then the hand is like supporting the weight of the torso. So this is not really working so much.
Right, right.
But so yeah, so that's really good. You would say that's kind of the main biomechanics of what's going on in
I
triangle.
I would say that.
It's mobilizing like in that front leg and hip and
Yes.
this back hip.
Yes.
It's not really strengthening.
Right. So like, yeah, you feel some work through the hamstrings and the adductors or inner thigh muscles on the front leg. More so if you're holding it for a while, maybe like it
Mhm.
starts to tire, but it's not like an appreciable amount of load that's going through that leg from like oh yeah, we're really getting stronger in this position.
Like
Like,
what if I was holding a weight and doing like squats or something?
then
It's
we'd
a
be
little
really getting
different than
stronger. Yeah.
triangle
Or
pose.
maybe holding a weight overhead as
Yeah.
we were doing triangle
Like,
pose.
yeah, right.
Uh,
That would add load, and then
that
that might be more
would be
strengthening.
strengthening. But yeah, when it's just your body weight, the first time or few times you do triangle pose as a beginner to a yoga
Maybe,
practice, that might feel strengthening. But you get pretty used to just your body weight over time, and then it becomes less effortful.
yeah. Yeah. So it's not, we would suggest triangle pose isn't really about strength so much. It's more about mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was an excellent description of triangle. Should we now think about half
Yeah,
moon? And
let's tip the teapot over.
yes, exactly.
So
Tip it and a move
now
away.
what we see, let's start with some of the similarities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
some of the similarities here are that the front leg, or the only leg now, that is still
Hmm.
in a position of external rotation
This leg
because the toes are flared out, and it's still in a position of hip flexion
and abduction, right?
and adduction.
Abduction.
Abduction. Yes.
Yes. So,
Abduction,
and all that's the
abduction.
same, right? As triangle.
That is all the same.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, the one thing that I was supposed to get right, I got wrong.
What? No, it's hard to hear
No,
abduction versus ad. I wasn't sure what you said.
I messed it up. So that leg is still in a position of abduction. What is different now is that this top leg has now moved from an adducted position to
Hmm.
an abducted position because Jenny is lifting that leg off the ground.
Well, it's moved from an adducted position to neutral, right? Position wise.
Sorry, yes. This is hard.
It really is.
She was in an adducted position. She has abducted to neutral.
That's
Yeah.
right.
If she were to lift the leg higher than parallel to the floor, then it would be abducted.
I could see if I can do that. Like if it was like that.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
feel really
Yeah.
crampy here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry. She's in a neutral position between hip adduction and hip abduction in that top leg.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other key difference is that now by raising that leg, she has shifted load from
Yeah.
what was previously both legs now onto just the one standing leg plus the hand if the hand is down, which it often is.
Exactly. And also about the lifted leg,
Mm-hmm.
it's in that neutral position, but the hip abductors are
Are working.
working, right?
Yes. So that is a big difference.
And that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a big difference because there's actually some good strengthening work, at least for me.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah,
Here.
like that. Yeah, that's not easy to hold that leg there. You have the full weight of the leg, so you're actually getting good hip abductor, lateral hip work on the top leg in that position.
Compared to triangle pose, where here there's really I mean,
Not much.
not much. Yeah, especially for those muscles. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we don't have that at all here. And then we tip into here, and suddenly those hip abductors are working.
Totally. And then by going onto one leg, you're shifting more load onto that standing leg, basically all of your body weight.
That's
And
right.
then the question becomes, well, is that strengthening now because I have all my weight on it? And I think if we were to just compare it to like, well, if we were to stand on one leg, is that strengthening? I wouldn't necessarily say so. It's balance work.
It's
stability work.
Yes.
Yeah. If standing on one leg were hard for a person, or standing on one leg were hard for a person in that tipped over position, maybe you get a little bit of strengthening, but over time, we pretty quickly adapt to those loads, and it becomes more, the challenge is more in the balance, I think,
Right. Yeah.
especially if the hand is over.
Yeah, right. So traditionally half moon is practiced with the hand down, like on a block or on the floor. And when the hand is down, we have more balance help because the hand is there. It's still some stability challenge, but if you were to lift the hand, then that adds even more stability challenge. And we're working harder in terms of stabilizing our body in the
Mm-hmm.
position, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like without the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that half moon has a significant element of stability challenge that triangle pose does not have?
I would. So when I practice both of these poses, I
Yes.
do find a stability challenge in triangle because
Yes.
you still have a narrow base of support. And when I say base of support, that's the distance in between your feet, basically, like that whole thing. But it's very narrow
Because
because
it's
your feet
along
are kind of
one.
like on a train track.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not quite, but like I would say that that front heel kind of bisects the back heel, right?
Yeah,
So
pretty
you
generally.
basically have just that distance and then your foot.
Yeah.
So there might be
Solidity.
some instability or feeling of having to maintain stability in the frontal plane,
Mm-hmm.
sagittal plane. Like you might feel the tendency to want to fall backward or forward.
Right.
So that is not trivial. But what then when you lift the leg and go onto
Mm-hmm.
one leg, now your base of support is only from your hand on the block to your foot. Or if you take your hand off the block, it's only your footprint of your left foot, which is a very big balance challenge.
That's right. So it's definitely turned up. But I totally hear you. There can be some stability challenge in triangle itself, but it's
Yeah.
kicked up a lot when you
Yeah.
lift that
Plus
leg.
there's like okay, I can stand on one leg, but when you're tipped over and not looking, trying to find a place to
Yes.
look, the orientation of your awareness changes, which makes the balance
Abs-
harder, I think.
Absolutely. So to kind of summarize, would we suggest that similarities between the two are that they are both mobilizing, like that front leg,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of hamstrings, adductors, hip mobility? They both mobilize that.
Yep.
But then the key differences are in triangle pose, we've got hip adduction. So we're mobilizing the hip into adduction. Did I
Mm-hmm.
say it right?
Yep.
And then in half moon, it shifts from adduction to neutral, and then
Yep.
we turn on the hip
Right.
abductors.
So like if you were interested in getting a little bit of stretch through the outer hip, you might practice triangle. If you're
Yeah,
interested in getting a little strength through the outer hip, you might practice
half
half
moon.
moon or just do both
Yeah, exactly.
since you
Like
can
well
go
rounded.
easily back and forth between them.
Exactly. So like those are kind of the main differences in terms of like what's being stretched and mobilized and what's working. And then there's that stability difference between the two as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you think we covered everything we wanted to cover
I do.
about these two fine yoga poses and just good things to keep in mind if we want to practice and or teach them intentionally with like an idea of what's
Hmm.
going on movement wise biomechanically in the poses?
Yeah. And again, like you saw, I messed up, so
You did
it's not trivial to figure that out. But it's helpful, I think, to really understand
to
the
unpack the
intricacies.
poses.
Yeah.
I think so too. I find it to be a really helpful practice. If you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all of the tips that I/we share.